What a game last night at the Wells Fargo Center between two of the top teams in the Eastern Conference in the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers, and a heavyweight bout between two NBA MVP candidates in Joel Embiid and Giannis. And while Giannis got the W and outperformed Joel Embiid to a certain extent, I still think Embiid is worthy of winning NBA MVP. So if you're with me and you still think that despite the loss, Embiid is the MVP, hit that thumbs up icon, like the video, and let's talk some Sixers. Welcome into Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Sr. A loaded show coming your way. We're talking Doc Rivers. We're talking about that loss to the Milwaukee Bucks as the Sixers blew yet another second-half lead, and whether or not Paul Reed, B-Ball Paul, should be getting playing time ahead of a guy like Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan, because the backup minutes after Joel Embiid, it's not good for Philadelphia, and they certainly need to improve in that area. So a final score last night of 118-116. The Bucks now with the tiebreaker over Philadelphia, owning the season series 2-1. Giannis was fantastic, 40 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 dimes. Chris Middleton was somewhat silent until that second half, especially in the fourth quarter when he hit a couple of big shots and made a couple of big plays. 22 points, 9 boards, and 7 dimes for him. And Drew Holiday, the former first-round pick out of UCLA for Philadelphia many years ago, playing very good lockdown defense in that fourth quarter against James Harden, after he was able to get that matchup against Harden, after not really guarding him throughout the duration of that ball game, able to drop 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 dimes. And for Philly, it was a great James Harden game, probably one of the best that he's played in a Sixers uniform. He's able to drop 32, 5, and 9. Embiid was fantastic, 29, 14, and 7. And it was also a very good night for Tobias Harris, 22 points, 11 boards, and 6 dimes. But really, when you think about this game in front of a nationally televised audience, it was one of the best games of the NBA season for a couple of reasons. Intensity, a playoff atmosphere, great players in Giannis and Joel Embiid, able to exchange blows throughout the duration of that ball game. You have Drew Holiday going up against James Harden. It felt like Game 7 of a critical playoff series, and that's the way that it played out. But once again, a consistent theme for Philadelphia is that they blow yet another lead, and the big takeaway for me, you kind of falter down the stretch, and this offense becomes clunky once again in the fourth quarter in the guts of the game, and it's an alarming trend for the Philadelphia 76ers under Doc Rivers. They get out to a really nice advantage, they get out to a really nice lead, and they look like one of the best teams in the NBA, just like they did on Sunday against the Phoenix Suns. But when the opposition makes adjustments, Doc Rivers in Philadelphia fail to counter some of those adjustments, and they fall apart in the second half, and they blew yet another large lead. And I'm really concerned in this way for Philadelphia, because do we have any confidence that the Philadelphia 76ers can make a deep playoff run with the lack of adjustments that are made by Doc Rivers and this coaching staff, and their inability to really execute down the stretch offensively with Joel Embiid and James Harden? And I understand it's still somewhat early. Harden and Embiid haven't played a lot of games together, but there's a large sample size that we're examining, that we're looking at, that we're monitoring here, and it goes back to last year. Philadelphia, in a lot of big games against some of the NBA's top teams, would run out of the gates and get off to these really sizable advantage. They did so many times and in multiple instances in that second round series against the Atlanta Hawks. But after Atlanta would adjust, Philadelphia couldn't adjust, and they'd really just crater down the stretch in some of these games. And that last year has carried over into this year. And I'm very concerned. And the Sixers have to prove to me that they can actually play flawless basketball down the stretch in order to make a deep playoff run in what is a loaded Eastern Conference. And Doc Rivers is really at the forefront of this conversation. Doc, you got to be better, but can he be better? Because throughout his coaching career, he has proven that he's been unable to make some of these adjustments. So I want to ask you this question, Sixers fans, and I'm with you. I'm emotional after a loss like this. I'm hurt. My heart is broken. Grade Doc Rivers' tenure with the Sixers so far on a scale of A, B, C, D, or F. It's going to be the pinned comment on today's YouTube video. See if you get hit with that YouTube ad break. Just scroll on down and get your votes in. As for when this game kind of changed, the Sixers have that 10-point lead in the third quarter going into the fourth quarter, but Chris Middleton and Giannis start to make a couple of really big plays, and late third quarter into the early fourth quarter really lost the game for Philadelphia because Giannis was able to go on this run with Embiid and Harden on the bench, and it wasn't DeAndre Jordan who was fulfilling the backup minutes after Joel Embiid. It was Paul Millsap, and Giannis just looked at that matchup, which was a mismatch for him. He exploited it, and he was eaten up, and nobody could stop him. And Joel Embiid agrees with me in saying that late third quarter, fourth quarter was really the changing point of this basketball game, and Embiid probably hopes that he was on the floor, but Doc Rivers didn't put him on the floor to match up some of those minutes going against Giannis Antetokounmpo. So Embiid, on how the game was kind of lost, said this after the game in South Philly: "The game really changed when I went to the bench. I didn't think we played at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth. Their best player scored like 17 points in a row or whatever that was. I didn't think we did what we had to do. They gained some momentum." And for Doc Rivers to consistently go once again with another awful center after Joel Embiid, this time in Paul Millsap, after DeAndre Jordan, and have him matched up against Giannis. I mean, Doc Rivers, what are you thinking having Paul Millsap consistently guard Giannis, who is the most dominant physical presence in the NBA right now, and continue to hunt that mismatch? It's Paul Millsap against Giannis, the reigning Finals MVP, who is the most dominant force in the NBA as of right now. And you have Paul Millsap guarding Giannis. I cannot fathom how, as a head coach of an NBA team, you can stand on the sideline and see Giannis consistently go after Paul Millsap and say, you know what, we're going to leave Joel Embiid on the bench. Let's continue to go with Paul Millsap guarding Giannis. That makes absolutely no sense. And last night, in a critical game between two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, as they're jockeying in the standings, and with a win, the Bucks are able to now own that season matchup 2-1. You just are cool with Paul Millsap continuing to guard Giannis. Doc, this is why I don't have confidence in you when it comes playoff time, and this is why Philadelphia is growing frustrated with your lack of adjustments, because we see what we see, and you don't see what we see, and you fail to make some of these adjustments. Doesn't make any sense at all. Doc Rivers, really? Got to be better. Does Paul Reed deserve more run as compared to Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan? We're going to explore this a little bit, but first, I want to hear from you. Type Y for yes or type N for no. Now, when you look at Paul Reed and his numbers this year, they're not going to blow anybody out of the water. 2 points per game, 2+ rebounds, half of assists, shooting around 46.5% from the floor. 6'9", 210, though. He's springy. He's athletic. He's quick. He puts forward a lot of effort, and he has that nonstop motor. He's more agile, more twitchy, and a better athlete than Paul Millsap, and I think he can give you a lot more than a player like DeAndre Jordan right now. So I understand that the Sixers are bereft of a quality center after Joel Embiid, and I understand that Doc Rivers often doesn't prefer playing younger players, but Paul Reed is going to be able to do a much better job on Giannis than the old, aged, and washed Paul Millsap. So at the end of the day, if you see Paul Millsap consistently get torched and DeAndre Jordan look awful and lost on the basketball floor because he too is washed, why can't you just go with Paul Reed? Why can't you go with Charles Bassey? I can guarantee you this, Doc Rivers. You might not like that they're inexperienced players, and there might be lapses in judgment at times because they lack some of that experience. But from an athletic standpoint, from an effort standpoint, they're going to give you more than Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan. So with a week and a half left of regular season play, Doc Rivers, you have to make that adjustment. Otherwise, in the playoffs, you're going to be doomed. Now, the NCAA tournament has not been doomed. It has been awesome. And if you want to get your bets in for the NCAA tournament Final Four, you can do so thanks to our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Head to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code CHAT125 for a 125% deposit bonus. You take a look at the championship odds going into Final Four weekend, pretty fascinating. And I think it's wide open. Everybody wants to talk about how Villanova is injured right now, but I think they're the most well-coached team and the most experienced NCAA tournament team. And I'll take Jay Wright over any of these coaches in the Final Four, including Coach K, who's Duke Blue Devils leading the charge at plus 155. Kansas after that. It's going to be another really good rematch in the NCAA tournament between the Jayhawks and the Wildcats. UNC at plus 475. I like Duke to beat UNC. I like Villanova to beat Kansas. Get your bets in. I'm going to be doing the same. Chatsports.com/bet. Promo code CHAT125. I made a lot of money last weekend because I had Villanova and Duke. Get those bets in thanks to our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Now, another big takeaway with the Sixers losing yet again to another good team in the Eastern Conference and another good team in the NBA is that the Sixers, after making the acquisition and the trade for James Harden, are close. They're very, very close. But before I believe that they can make a deep playoff run and compete for an NBA championship and get to the Eastern Conference Finals, they have to show me that they can work out some of these late-game flaws. And with Harden and Embiid against some of the elite teams since the trade, the Sixers are 0-5. It all started against the Brooklyn Nets in a really big prove-it game for Philadelphia, in which they got blown out by a final score of 129-100 on the 10th of March. Another good litmus test at home once again against the Denver Nuggets. They lost once more in another close game down the stretch, 114-110. That weird Sunday night game at home against the Toronto Raptors, they lose to a shorthanded Raptors team that was without Fred VanVleet, 93-88 in a very sluggish game in which the Sixers scored like 35 points in that first quarter and then ended with 88. They go on the road on Sunday against the Phoenix Suns. They get out to a 15-point lead. Then they blow it late as the Suns end up pulling away as the best team in the NBA, another L. And then on Tuesday night, once more against one of the league's best in the Milwaukee Bucks, they're up, then they lose it late. Final score, 118-116. So with that, I ask you this, my final question, poll question for the audience before we hop on out of here. Will the Sixers advance past the second round? I'm going to say H for home because they have to prove it to me first. I'm not trying to be an emotional Philadelphian who's overreacting. We just looked at 5 games against some of the league's best teams in which the Sixers have really just fallen apart late. So type A for advance, H for they're going home. Let me know. Thanks for watching today's show, and make sure you subscribe.